All right, here we are. We are jumping into the beginning of the battle that Gideon fights against the Midianites. And the first important part about fighting a battle is recruiting your army. So we're going to talk today about Gideon's recruitment strategies and his number one recruitment consultant. So jump on in and let's talk about it in the video. I'll see you there. Welcome to the Equipped Disciple channel. My name is Rick McClatchy. I will be your host. We are here to be and to make disciples of Jesus, and we do that through daily devos, through Sunday sermons, and through other discipleship resources. We are here to equip you. All right, here we are, jumping into Judges chapter 7. We made it to another chapter. Great job, everybody. And so we're going to be talking about the power of less. Why? God doesn't need your strength. 300 is sometimes greater than 32,000. That is a mathematical expression that doesn't make any rational sense, but we're going to dig into what we're talking about there. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all of the troops. This is Judges chapter 7 and verse 1. All the troops who were with him got up early and camped beside the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them, below the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many troops for me to hand the Midianites over to them, or else Israel might elevate themselves over me and say, 'I have saved myself.' Announce to the troops, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, they may turn back and leave Mount Gilead.'" So 22,000 chickens, 22,000 scaredy cats. I'm not saying I wouldn't have been part of them. I'm just saying that is a lot of chickens. That's a lot of scared people. But, I mean, it's probably wise to be a little bit scared of battle against an army that you're probably still outnumbered by. So we don't want to say, I'm not trying to be overly negative. But, if you were Marty McFly right now, you'd be like, nobody calls me chicken. And then you would have stayed, and that would have been bad. So don't do that. Don't follow the Marty McFly routine, okay? And so now announce to the troops, whoever is fearful and trembling may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 of the troops turned back, but 10,000 remained. So here we see that the initial number of troops was 32,000 that showed up, and then 22,000 of them left because they were scared, leaving us the magical number of 10,000. Surely that is going to be the right number, and we are going to be done with the process. But one thing I just noticed is it said they got up early. And there's this indication with Gideon that something about him was waiting on the Lord, to hear from the Lord what they were going to do. They were not rushing into battle. He's cut his army, right? So he's got 32,000 people hanging out with him, ready to go to battle, and yet he gets up early and he just listens. He's just listening to the Lord. So I just thought, man, that's a good lesson for us to learn, is that we take time to listen to the Lord, even when it might seem obvious, right? It might seem like, well, duh, we go to battle. We've got our troops, we've got our enemy, we go to battle. No, he was taking some time to really try to get a hold of what God was saying and what God wanted them to do in that situation. So his actions, it seems that he was listening with the full intent to obey. And I can't emphasize that enough. Don't wait on the Lord if you don't plan on doing what he says, right? Even when what he says just feels a little crazy, because God then follows that up by saying, "You have too many troops. Your army is too big, bro." And when's the last time you heard anybody say, "My army is too big"? No, they're always driving the recruitment statistics and goals and quotas to get to a certain level because, bigger is better when it comes to the size of your army. But God is saying about what this reveals about Gideon and what it reveals about humanity. It's kind of annoying, right? It's kind of insulting, but it's also really true. God comes in and he says, hey, your army is too big, because if you win the battle with all of these troops, then you are going to run a very high risk of walking away from this victory thinking that you did it, thinking that you accomplished it, that it was by your strength, by your smartness, by your ingenuity, that you're the one that made this win happen. And that is only going to exacerbate the very reason why the Midianites have control over the Israelites right now. Because the Midianites are in control because the Israelites are being rebellious against God. They are thinking too highly of themselves, too lowly of God. And so if God delivers them from the Midianites in such a way that they end up being more reliant on themselves and more confident in themselves, he will have served the purposes of the enemy and not of himself. So God knows what he's doing. God knows what is required in order to accomplish his big picture, like the big picture goal of this whole situation, not just the temporary small battle victory. And so that is kind of along the lines of what it reveals about God, is that God's looking at the big picture. God's more concerned about your character than he is concerned about your immediate comfort. So God may intentionally put you in situations where you're like, man, this is uncomfortable. I do not feel good about this position that we are in. And yet, we just need to recognize that God is much, much more interested in developing our character, developing our relationship with him, developing our understanding of where our strength lies, so that we don't operate in such a frame of self-confidence, self-pride, self-righteousness. Like, we want to base who we are and where we're going on who he is, less so on who we are. And so that's a huge thing, is of just the whole thing, what it reveals about God. He cares more about your character right now than he does about your immediate comfort. And sometimes that's kind of a bummer, because we all like to be comfortable. And as a reminder for all of us, God doesn't need us. God doesn't need us to take out the Midianites. He doesn't need us to win that battle. But yet he desires us and pursues us. Like, God is because it's not the victory that is the point. It's the process and what God is accomplishing along the way. Like, sometimes we get a little too distracted by the target, by the goal, and we forget about the process of what's getting us there. So he desires us and he pursues us to be involved with him on mission. So we need to remember that as we are seeking out the calling of God on our lives, the purpose that God has created for us, that we don't get this narrow focus where we're just trying to get that thing done. Like, we do not want to just try to fulfill the purposes of God and forget about relationship and growing with God. Because if all God wanted was to get the stuff done, he would just do the stuff. There's a bigger purpose involved, and why God involves us in the process is because he wants to form us, mold us, shape us, and make us more like him. So the result of this first round of obedience from Gideon took his army from 32,000 down to 10,000. And I'm sure he thought, okay, we're good. But then the Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many troops. And Gideon was like, oh, yay. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. I will test them for you there. If I say to you, this one can go with you, then he can go. But if I say about anyone, this one cannot go with you, he cannot go. Good warning. I'm actually super impressed with Gideon on just how obedient he was with the Lord, even when the commands that he's receiving feel a little out of the norm, you know. And so he brought the troops down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, separate everyone who laps water with his tongue like a dog, you know, just with their face down in the water, drinking it up. And do the same with everyone who kneels to drink. So somebody maybe who kneels down and they're scooping the water up with their hand to drink, maybe while even keeping watch. I don't know, like being aware. So still too many. Oh, yikes, Lord, come on. Like, what in the world are you doing to us here? The number of those who lapped with their hands to their mouth, the ones that kneeled and brought the water up to their mouth, that was 300 men. Can you believe that 31,000, or sorry, I guess we're down to 10,000. So that 9,700 of them. I mean, who would have guessed that statistical breakdown of people that lap the water up like a dog, or those that scoop it to their mouth? Like, it's kind of mind-boggling that many people, you know, did the same thing. And so and all the rest of the troops knelt to drink the water. The Lord said to Gideon, I will deliver you with the 300 men who lapped and hand the Midianites over to you, but everyone else is to go home. So just send everybody home. I don't want any stragglers. I don't want any of that crew here, because we want a clear and decisive victory with the smallest of armies. So Gideon sent all the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 troops who took the provisions and their ram's horns, and the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. All right, so final round of army layoffs lead us to a 10,000, now down to 300, and that is not a typo. Like, it's not from 10,000 to 3,000. No, 10,000 to 300. Unbelievable. Wow. So that is, that's just a wow. Huge props to Gideon, really, again, in this whole historical encounter here. Huge props to Gideon for actually doing what God said, even when it sounded crazy. And so just maybe do a little reflection on your own heart. Like, what's been the last response you gave to the Lord when you feel like God told you to do something? Did you obey? Did you respond? Did you question? Did you maybe try it your own way? You know, like the whole Ishmael plan with Abraham, you know, like, is that what you did? Or did you just say, yes, Lord, I'm in this? And then huge props to God for giving the why of the whole process so that we don't have to guess. Because I love that the thing that he reveals about human nature is that I need to shrink down the size of your army so that you don't take the credit for yourself. And so I just want, you know, like the big lesson for us today is why less is more sometimes, why, you know, God can do more with the little than you could ever do with your entire whole thing. You know, it's like in tithing, you know, God can do a lot more with your 90% than you could do with your 100, you know, or he can do more with your 10%, right? When you give him your 10%. But the call out here of human nature and our tendency towards that self-righteousness and like, we did it, we made the difference, is something to really pay attention to here. Probably just a incredibly valuable lesson for us to listen to in this, so that no matter what the size of our army is, for whatever battle we might be fighting, that we recognize that our victory in the battle comes from the Lord. That without him we can do nothing. And that the point of this whole thing is to be with him, because again, he doesn't need us. He doesn't need us to accomplish his things. Like, he's fully capable. He is completely complete in himself. And so when we get invited into the work of the King, it is not a burden. it is an invitation and a privilege. I just think that's an incredible mindset for us to keep in mind. He doesn't need us. He's more concerned about your character than he is about your comfort. And also, he points out that human nature has this tendency to bring credit for the victory onto our own hearts rather than giving it to the Lord. So with that, I hope you're encouraged today. God bless you. Have an amazing day, and I will see you tomorrow.
Hey, if you're getting value out of these videos, if you could just make sure you hit the like button, maybe subscribe to the channel. YouTube is suggesting a video right about here for you to check out. So go ahead and check out the next video.